that kind of solidarity. So my question is, what does real solidarity mean to you between issues, between communities? And also, is it possible and or necessary to have a unified front to create a movement of movements?
For the second question, I'll start with, I appreciate both of them. I think we have to have a united front. It has to be coalescing across the board. No doubt about that. Being an ecological catastrophe, impending nuclear catastrophe, white supremacy, patriarchy, homophobia, serious class issues, critiques of capitalist civilization, and so on. But I do think a measure of solidarity has to do with receptivity. We got to learn how to listen to them. Take time to take things. Noah's elevator actually came up with a conception of political receptivity about Moses and the others. I think it amazing. How could it be that everybody knew the elevator was the wisest person in the room, but she spoke fewer words, and she was always listening. But when she spoke, given her economy of expression, it said more than most folks put together. That's a mastery of the art of receptivity that makes what you then have to say full of more gravitas. In addition, though, I do think we're at a moment now, because I think we have to be very honest. Things are very, very, very dark. And there's a chance that before we have a plan. We know that. These oligarchs would blow up the whole planet. In the same way they would, they'd kill all the leaders. America could be fascist in 10, 15 years. We couldn't even have these meetings anymore. See, folk like me would have been dead a long time ago. So we just don't know. But one sign of solidarity beyond the listening and the conversation is we have to be willing to put our bodies on the line in the context of our various struggles. If we had ecological activists going to jail in Ferguson, that if we had straights willing to highlight and go to jail, put a spotlight on how trans folk are being trashed. If we had men who were standing with womanists and feminists right when they are standing right there with our Latino brothers and sisters when they're being demonized by highly influential. So I don't have to characterize Brother Trump. That's good. Nutrition again. You ain't lying, but I'm trying to be Christian. Demonizers of our precious Mexican brothers and sisters. But we have to be willing to do that based on principle. So that, when we get there, we don't need to be congratulated because we are allies. No, we're fellow freedom fighters. We're there because we want to be persons of integrity, honesty, decency. That's how we do things. That's why we're doing it. You know what I mean? And at that point, you then get a more genuine form of solidarity because the actions speak louder than words. People would rather see sermons than hear them. Those are the two ways, I think, to be wrestled with your questions.
And how many folks, just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how many folks are familiar with intersectionality as a theory? But so that means how many folks are not? Okay. We just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to be talking about intersectionality a lot this semester. We want to make sure we're on the same page. Yes.
Thank you for being here. So in the latter part of your definition of this Black Midnight Fire, you talk about this willingness to live and die for freedom for the people. But I have a two-part question, I guess. One, what does Black and brown freedom look like to you in the U.S.? And two, how do we keep inspiring our Black and brown youth to fight for this freedom when it seems hard to even conceptualize what freedom looks like? Because we've been spoon-fed this idea that freedom exists and that we're free, but we're so enslaved, and it's arguably worse than it was back then. So I was wondering how to grapple with that.
That's a profound question. I'll try to first respond on a superficial level. You know, even superficiality has its place. You know, just like vulgar Marxism, we know it's not right, but it always has its place because it helps to keep track of what's happening. And I think that, especially when it comes to peoples of color, black folk, and others, that there's always been too many deaths that are arbitrary, too much poverty, and not enough self-love and self-respect. So that if, for example, we could minimize, if not thoroughly do away with, the early deaths that take place owing to structural injustice, if we eliminated poverty, and if we had a spiritual and moral awakening among people of color, let's say especially black folk, so that we had unbelievable ebullient enactments of self-love, self-respect, self-regard, and a sense of we consciousness. That's a different kind of revolution. Now that would mean, though, and this is where we move from the superficial, because your question has to do with, the world. We've got intersectionality, and we've got networks of mutuality around the world. If we had all of that in the American empire, and yet our brothers and sisters in Brazil, Mexico, the Middle East, Asia still catching hands, then we still have no grounds for just celebrating our relative freedom, as they are still wrestling with forms of unfreedom. See what I mean? I mean, that was so very important. This was a crucial crossroads in the Black Freedom Movement in the 1940s when they booted Du Bois out of the NAACP. And Walter White, who was president of the NAACP, who was appointed the part of the American delegation to the UN. And they had to choose between Cold War liberalism or a freedom movement that was in solidarity with the wretched of the earth around the world. And when I talked about Paul Robeson, when I talked about Du Bois and others, they were demonized and marginalized because they opted for the latter. Walter White and others opted for the former, and it won out. Cold War liberalism won out, and it transformed into neoliberalism even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is the precondition of the Cold War, because it was against US and USSR. And so black folk began to think, oh my God, if we can just get ours in America, we don't have to worry about those others. That's why they hated Martin, making the connection to Vietnam. We ain't worried about them. We're going to get ours. Martin, what's the problem? Why are you so concerned about, well, you talking about Latin America? Well, now see, Mandela in South Africa was a little different for the Cold War liberals. You know, that was a little too close to our situation. They got apartheid. They called it discrimination, but we know it's really apartheid. Discrimination is just a deodorized category trying to trivialize the suffering of black people. It was terror. And they said, well, okay, we can have solidarity with maybe the ANC. We're not talking about too many other organizations. Du Bois, Robeson, Victoria Garvin, and others, Benjamin Davis, and I thought, no. This is a worldwide thing. And that's where it moves from the domestic. And I'm calling it superficial only because I think we have to go global. But you can imagine it's not superficial in terms of every life being precious. And if we did eliminate poverty, and if we did have more